Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It is your favorite warlock and practicing necromancer. Today, I want to kind of take things a step forward. I know many of you are probably confused about my latest posts and stuff like that. So, I want to get down to the nitty gritty on the latest series that I'm working on, practice wise. Now, in the past, I've done a series on Satanism. It was called The Journey into Satanism, basically discussing what Satanism is, what it is not, how it's practiced, the tools and, understanding demonolatry, the rituals and stuff like that, sacrificings, offerings, all that goody stuff, right? And I've also done a series or two on witchcraft as well, going into in-depth practices, methods, and the creeds and everything. I did a complete series on necromancy in the past. Really loved that series. That one really pushed beyond most of what people know in spirituality today. But then you get into the Warlock series. And the Warlock series was really about practitioners going solitary. Okay, and what that dealt with is the truth about what a warlock is, not what most people apply it to be. Because let's face it, the very definition of warlock, being an oath breaker, a betrayer, a liar, a murderer, is basically Welsh and Scottish etymology of what the meaning of the word is, without actually exploring what it is for a male practitioner of witchcraft. And it went right in through various different regions of the world, from voodooism to the folk religions such as Brujeria, Santeria, Palo Mayombe, and so forth, all the way into Druidism and shamanism, necromancy, and so forth. It was a good sized series that broke it down not only just about what a practitioner is from a male perspective, but it also went into the practices, different authors and viewpoints that have studied the same path workings, and it went into so much detail, and I really enjoyed that particular series that I did. And I've kind of been going back to my earlier series that I've done, and I thought, you know what? I have never done one from the JCI, the Judo-Christian Institutions. So I thought I would do a series on the Bible and of God, of Jehovah, and all that stuff too, because it's only fair as a multi-faith minister that I also bring this into my channel, because of the fact that there's a lot of good rituals that go into this as well. There's a lot of good routines. There's a lot of spirituality involved. And if you're spiritual like I am, you're going to really click with this, and this is why. So, because of the fact that when you go to church today, they're always preaching the same damn things. The same damn things. And they preach the same way with that, hey, yeah, at the end. You know what I'm saying? That like, the faith type thing, And it's always the same damn thing. And it's so comical watching them. It's like they work themselves up. They're so out of breath that they can't even complete a word without having to put that at the end, So, anyways, it doesn't matter if it's Catholicism. It doesn't matter if it's Jehovah's Witness. It doesn't matter if it's Baptist perspectives, either North or Southern. Church of Jesus Christ. Let's go with Apostolics or Pentecostals. it's kind of hard to preach the truth when most ministers today have learned from the Orthodox Church. Now, what do I mean by the Orthodox Church? Well, if you go back through Christianity and the history of Christianity, from Hebrewism to Judaism to mainstream Catholicism, you'll realize that there are two churches. There's the Church of Axiom, which is in Ethiopia, and then you have the Orthodox Church, which came a little bit later and diverted off of that. Okay. Now, the ironic part is the Orthodox Church looked at all 88 books, okay, all 88 books, and they discarded about 22 of the books to make their current Bible. Now, I want you to think about this for just a minute. The Orthodox Bible that we know today, all the Bibles that we have today, have 66 books. The Catholic Bible has roughly around 71 to 73 books in their particular Bible. And yet, if you go back to the Ethiopian Bible, or better yet, let's go to the Tyndale Bible, I think it's 36, I think, is when that Bible came out. You look at that Bible, it's got all the books from the New Testament, and a quarter of the books from the Old Testament. All the prophets, the book of Psalms, the book of Proverbs, all that stuff is gone from it. Not even in it. Okay? So I took it further back. I still haven't had a chance to order the Vulgate Bible, 2nd century. I've been looking around for a specific one that I really want to get my hands on. And I found it interesting that I got my hands on the Ethiopian Bible. Okay. And I've been reading that. The first book I went into, because I've read the Bibles. Okay. I've read a lot of different types of Bibles, from the Gideon to the King James, New King James, NIV, all of them, pretty much. And I found them to be lacking. There's nothing to connect to. There's no substance. It's just pure chaos. D.H. Thorne would love those Bibles, by the way, since he's a chaos magician. I'm just saying. But anyways, I found them to be lacking. There's no substance, no historical views, no information. It's just like a quick touch-up. It's like a woman going into the restroom and touching up her makeup. There's no substance behind it. It's just a quick touch-up of watered-down layers, corrupted layers, if you will. So when I got into the Ethiopian Bible, I also was looking at the books that I got through the Ring of Grimm. Through the Ring of Grimm's recommendations. Things like the Book of Baruch, The Way of the Pilgrim, As a Man Thinketh, the Adam and Eve story, The Wisdom of Solomon, the Book of Sirach. Okay? But when I got into the Ethiopian Bible, the first book that I turned to was the Book of Jubilees. And I started reading that, and I got about 4, maybe 5 chapters in before I realized it's following the book of Genesis. So I went back to the book of Genesis. I got out one of my other Bibles. I came over and I sat down with it. And I'm comparing the book of Jubilees to the book of Genesis. And each chapter is going through like 3, maybe 4 chapters in the book of Genesis. But he's going into 10 times more information than today's Bibles do. It's like you're actually getting the substance that you're looking for, which is pretty cool to see. Okay? So, anyways, once I got done the book of Jubilees, I went into the Book of Enoch. But I've also been going through YouTube channels looking at the Ethiopian Bible. I've been going through all the books, and one name kept popping up, and it was Mel Gibson. And then you got what's his name there, Jim. Oh, what the hell? The actor there, the guy that played Jesus in Passion of the Christ. And the backdrop of the story of that and how we got into it, how we basically got a tarnished name because of it, how everything went down with that movie, and how Mel Gibson ended up putting in like $30 million of his own money into it, and now he's doing it again with part two, which is broken down into two different segments. One on the day of on Easter, and about the second half of the second one is going to be out in like 40 days after the fact. I believe it's the holy days of the birth and the resurrection type thing. And he actually stated that he went back to the beginning, which was the fall of the angels. You know, the fall of the Watchers, the 200 Watchers that became how should I say this? The chief demons, if you will, the chief overlords of the underworld, as we know them today, like kings and princes and stuff like that, like Satan, Beelzebub, and all that stuff. But we also see where the hierarchy of the angels came into play, which was also very cool. Now, one thing came into mind was chapter 106 in 1 Corinthians. And like I said, you probably noticed my recent posts dealing with the devil, but also dealing with racism, religious wars, skin color, disliking your neighbor type thing. And we're seeing a lot of this crap today that should have been squelched like 50 to 100 years ago, but it's still there because people want to make it an issue. And of course, the media is right there making it the same damn issue anyways. So it's nothing more than a freaking distraction. So I went into the Ethiopian Bible, and I turned to first Enoch, and I'm going down through, and it said chapter 106, 1 Enoch, chapter 106, and I realized there's no 106. Again, they didn't put everything in the same book. Luckily for me, I've had this book for years, the Book of Enoch. Okay. Now, in this one here, the Book of, there's Jubilees, 1 Enoch, which starts on page 246 of this book and goes to page 269 and ends with chapter 105. Okay? So, I actually, like I said, I happen to remember that I had this because I thought maybe they mispronounced it and made it, second Enoch. Unfortunately, second Enoch, which begins on page 270, goes all the way to page 278 and stops at chapter 68. Interesting, right? So I remembered I had this one. So sure enough, way in the back, I have everything I needed. 106, 103, 4, 5, and 6. Chapter 106 in the Book of Enoch. And like I said, this book here teaches you everything. These books teach you everything you need to know about the fall of the angels, the creation of the world, and goes into much bigger detail than what the main Bible does. And I thought it was kind of funny because there's been a lot of speculation on man and woman being conjoined, how The body, the ribs, the bones represent different things. From, say, for an example, the dying parent, the parent, creating a child, which became the husband or wife of Adam. And we've also seen this also in the Old Testament, where the daughters got their father drunk and produced heirs, which is incest, basically. But here's the kicker. Where do you begin to even do a series on biblical things, especially from the church? When you have one church that has already corrupted everything from the time that the first official Bible came out, underneath that establishment, how do you trust anything since that time? You can't. So when I came across Mel Gibson's video, his interview with Joe Reagan, and he was discussing the Ethiopian Bible, I went down through, I don't know how many videos, just on the Ethiopian Bible, from the fall of the angels to the second coming of Christ, to what the devil looks like, the rapture and all that stuff. And I went down through a lot of videos. It wasn't from different channels, just to do my research. And then, like I said, I started thinking about the Ring of Grimm and the platform building a strong foundation. And I even, my son wanted to go to church. He wanted to check things out. So I said, all right, I'll take you. So I took him to an old church, my friend's church, and we were sitting there in the back, and he loved it. He did. He loved it. He liked the music. Wasn't too keen on the preaching, which, to be fair, I don't blame him. They tend to like the sound of their own voice. Okay, and the people most of them are fake anyways. They tend to put on this fake charade of liking you. They put on this fakery of an image just to bring people in, and then they disregard them. And it's like you're going to shun them no matter what. So what's the fucking point of, being friends with somebody or playing nice with somebody? If you're already going to shun them as soon as they get in and they don't immediately do what you tell them to do, and you're just going to shun them, what's the point, right? So anyways, I was talking with my son. His mother really hated the fact that I took him specifically to that church. Because let's face it, she's a Baptist. Okay, that's how she grew up. It was a very strict heritage for her. And seeing him go to an apostolic or a Pentecostal church just to check things out, it really got her knickers in a twist. Okay? But like I said, she's all right with it because it was his choice to want to go to that church. And what's ironic about it is it's one of those things that there's no structure. Everybody's doing their own thing. And like I said, I was sitting there, and I was observing the congregation. I was observing, the junior ministry, if you will, that he's put together up front. And you can always tell who they are because they're the ones that he associates with the most. And then you look at when there's another minister in play, like, say, the reverend or another pastor, that he's all over about them, and it's all that show and tell. Let's put on the good boy imagery, and it's like there's no structure, there's no substance there's no meaningful cabal, there's no coven, there's no brotherhood, no kinship. It's fake, the whole thing through. It's organized religion. So I started thinking about this, and I went in, and like I said, I've been reading multiple books here. I'm starting on these two, by the way. Very interesting things. The wisdom of Solomon is kind of put forth similar to that of the Bible in the Book of Enoch, the blue one that I showed you. But basically, this one here steps into the world of a timeless wisdom of the wisdom of Solomon, known as the Book of Wisdom. And it's an ancient text that offers profound reflections on life, justice, and the power of divine insight. The traditionally attributed to King Solomon, it has guided readers for centuries with its rich exploration of morality, the afterlife, and the relationship between humanity and the divine. And it goes into, although no longer included in the modern Bibles, the Wisdom of Solomon remains a vital part of biblical tradition for Catholic and Orthodox communities. As part of the Apocrypha, it bridges the gap between Hebrew scriptures and early Christian thought, offering unique perspectives that continue to resonate today. Whether you're seeking deeper biblical understanding or insights into the pursuit of righteousness, this edition invites you to explore more enduring teachings of Solomon and enrich your spiritual journey. Now, you notice how that actually was put into play there. It spoke on justice, about righteousness, living righteous, and it talks a lot about your thoughts. You remember in a past video I did a video on the science of being well by Wallace D. Wattles, and I told you that how you think is what you become. And I compared it to like the chakras, the kundalini, and the corruption of the meridians. How it ties into your mental health, your physical health, and all that stuff. And you can see that in numerous different traditions, by the way. So, anyways, let me get the Book of Sirach here for you. This book really deals with a lot of different things, and like I said, I haven't even begun to read this one yet. But according to the preface, let me just get in here real fast so I can actually show it to you. This Jesus was the son of Sirach, the grandchild to Jesus, of the same name with him. This man, therefore, lived in the latter times after the people had been laid away captive and called home again, and almost after all the prophets. Now, this grandfather Jesus, as he himself witnesseth, was a man of great diligence and wisdom among the Hebrews. He did not only gather the grave in short sentences of wise men that had been before him, but himself also uttered some of his own, full of much understanding and wisdom. And he goes on down through there, and down here, let me go down here, right there. And when, as therefore the first Jesus died, leaving this book almost perfected, Sirach, his son, receiving it after him, left it to his own son Jesus, who, having gotten it into his hands, compiled it all orderly into one volume and called it Wisdom. Until, oh my God, I apologize, I can't speak today. Both by his own name, by his father's name, and grandfather's, alluring the hearer by the very name of wisdom to have greater love to the study of this book. It containeth therefore wise sayings, dark sentences, and parables, and contain particular ancient godly stories of men that please God. Also his prayer and song, moreover, that benefits God, had vouchsafed his people, and the plagues he had heaped upon their enemies. Yada, yada, yada. Okay? Now, like I said, those two books there I have not fully gotten into. I've only kind of skimmed it. But they seem like interesting books, and I recommend them. And I definitely want to delve into them to see what they involve and how it goes along with the Enochian Bible. Now, the one thing I have noticed is the Ethiopian Bible speaks a lot on justice. It deals with supplications. It deals with repentance. It deals with prayer, devotion. And it's like, okay, how do you build upon that? Well, first of all, As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, basically the way he put it is you're the God of your own world, your own circumstances. So that's number one, okay? If you are a godly man, a just man, you want justice for your family, for your people. You know, it doesn't matter if you're a clan, it doesn't matter if you're in a coven, a cabal, or you're in a congregation. Think about that. If somebody attacks your people, your family, what man is not going to step up to the plate and kick some ass? You know? So, but it's really not about violence, though. It's more about seeking justice and seeking truth. What caused somebody to attack you? What was the cause of somebody not liking you? You know, why did people shun you? Why? What is it about you that has placed you in such a negative thought? You know, a negative place. What brought you into the state where your health is failing? What brought you into the state where you want to commit suicide or made you depressed? Again, you'd have to go into Hinduism and Buddhism and occult practices to get in, even Hermeneutics to get into things like the tree of life or tree of Da'ath, so you can actually go into deeper thoughts and really delve into each specific thing and its meaning. Because when you look at your chakras, your kundalini, and your meridians, each one of these affects your mental state, your emotional state, your physical health, and so forth. I recommend As a Man Thinketh includes The Mastery of Destiny by James Allen. Very, very good book. So, first of all, you have to change the way that you think about things, how you approach things. You know, you can be a Satanist and approach the Bible within a, let's call it a reverse psychology effect. Okay? And what I mean by that is if you're a Satanist, you're already coming at it from a corrupted viewpoint. Because even though you relate to, say, Anton LaVey's, you know, the LaVeyan Bible, or that of any of the other satanic Bibles that are out there, you're already decided that you hated God. You've already hated, you know, all that stuff that goes along with the church. So therefore, you're going to play the bad guy to the church and nitpick through everything. Instead of taking a clear look as a third party, read down through the Bible. Read down through the books that are mentioned in there. The things that are not in there. I mean, look, as you're going back through history, you're going to notice things like various different types of Bibles going back to the 16th century. Then you're going to get into the Tyndale Bible, the Vulgate Bible, the Ethiopian Bible, and so forth. You're going to get into things such as the Jewish Haggadah, the Talmud, the Book of Tobit. You're going to get into the Zohar, and so far, and so much more that you're going to get into. And when you do that, you're going to have a clearer understanding. Wait a minute. These modern Bibles are pointing Satan as being the proverbial bad guy, the enemy of God. Which is not the original case, because if you read the Ethiopian Bible, you'd realize, number one, Satan was a Gregora. He was the chief watcher angel. He was the one that fulfilled the duties of accusing mankind, of not living right for Jehovah. He was known as the tempter of man. He fulfilled an office, an actual duty, an office that he fulfilled quite diligently. And the funny thing is that even in modern Bibles, when we go into, say, for example, the book of Job, we see in chapter 1 where Satan just scrolls right into the kingdom of God. God goes, hey, where the hell have you been? And he says, oh, here, there, through and about. By the way, your people aren't living right for you. Did you know that? And he's like, well, have you considered my humble servant Job from this region? And he said, yeah, I mean, I can consider him. I mean, what do you need me to do, basically? And he says, you can do whatever you want to him, but you can't kill him. You can't kill him. So what happens to the story of Job? He loses his home. He loses his flock, his livelihood, his family. His friends turned against him. He ended up with leprosy. But nowhere in the Bible does it say that Satan is a murderer. He never killed anybody. But yet modern Christians will sit there and go, Satan is a murderer. He's the enemy of God. First of all, if God is the only God, and angels were created by God, by Jesus himself, and there's numerous testimonies throughout the Old Testament, within both the Ethiopian Bible and today's Bibles, within the books of Moses, they clearly dictate the coming of Jesus in the New Testament. Wow. Okay. So we see where not only is there a clear telltale sign, hints that Jesus is coming. By the time you get to the book of Matthew, the first of the 4 Gospels put in there. But you also see where all these angels, such as Belial, as we know him today, is found in Leviticus. I believe it's Leviticus, what is it, 10, I think? Where it's either 10 or 16. It's been a little bit, so bear with me. Where it says, it talks about the sons and daughters of Belial. Okay? This is found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the scroll of Amri, to be precise. You can actually look into that yourself. It's a scroll of Amri. It's part of the Dead Sea Scrolls. It was also found in 1940, 1949, I think. It was the 1940s that they were discovered. And it was kind of interesting because even Michael was seen as a warrior. The warrior. He who was like God in Hebrew. Soul collector in medieval texts. He was the collector of souls. And then if you go back into Sanskrit, his name means face of love. So which variation are we going by here? And in the book of Enoch, first Enoch, throughout the chapters, I believe it starts at 21, I believe, 20, 21, and 22, it discusses the various types of angels. But it also talks about the ones that have fallen. Very, very interesting to see, to note, and to take the, what they're about. And the spelling of Azazel today is nowhere near the way it was back written in Ethiopian times. Spectacular to see. But it brings that question. We still got the great floods. We got the threat of volcanic eruptions, fire and brimstone, the different types of prisons, such as the Catholics refer to it as purgatory. We see the 3 worlds, in Greek mythology, We see the heaven, hell, and purgatory within Catholic traditions. And then we see where in the main Bibles today, we see where you have the prison, basically the county jail, if you will, what I call the county jail, because it's basically a holding cell for just about every type of spirit, from the angels down to mankind, built for both justice, judgment, and so forth. And I found it very interesting that even mankind can go between the throne of God at the end times and go, I don't want to be judged. Because that's your right. But then you're going to be put into what is called one of the four rooms based off how you lived in your life. Now, it's clearly spoken of in First Enoch, of where you're going to be separated, the just from the unjust, the murderers from the victims, and so forth. And then you got, the three hells, if you will, where you got one section of hell for humans who have been condemned. Then you have the demons or Nephilims who have their own little area of hell that's where they've been condemned and put into hell. And then you have what is called the final one, or the first level, which is for the fallen angels that have basically violated their orders and their duties and all that stuff that created and supplicated with daughters of men, creating the Nephilims, the giants on the earth, found in Genesis 6:4, or Genesis 6 verses 1 through 4. But the Book of Enoch really goes, both 1, 2, and 3, really go into great detail on how the world was shaped from that time forward. It would be like reading the Book of Jubilees and realizing that the Book of Genesis and Exodus is what that book was about. It just goes into 10 times more, or no, scratch that, 100 times more information. Whereas you get this little peephole into what these scriptures are, and then you got somebody fulfilling their obligation by telling you what it means. And it's like, I don't think that's what it means. But reading that, damn. Okay? But the Adam and Eve story, The History of Cataclysms Uncensored, Magnetic Pole Shifts by Chan Thomas, I do recommend that book. And this is why. He deals with the Book of Ezra, and the Book of Ezra, the only place you'll find the Book of Ezra right now is in the Ethiopian Bible. And it goes into so much detail that is spectacular. You go into Genesis chapter 1, 2, and 3, and that's what that book is about, dealing with magnetic pole shifts, dealing with the cataclysms of landslides and earthquakes, the extreme weather conditions like hurricanes, twisters, sandstorms. Let's go into the Ring of Fire, volcanic activity. The great floods when the land collapses due to earthquakes, and all of a sudden you got water rushing in. Getting it. There's one section in the old Bible, the Bible, that says that there's water below and above the firmament. Okay, now we can take this from a scientific perspective and go, okay, there's water under the ground because of catacombs and everything, underground rivers. This is a proven fact. Okay, look at the spritzer thing there in Yellowstone. It spews water up every so often, the geyser, and then all of a sudden you're looking at, say for an example, the Grand Canyon, the rapids, the water's going one way, and then all of a sudden, wait a minute, it's shifted and it's going the other way. It can get real quiet, real good, and then all of a sudden it starts getting choppy. That's very scary for somebody that doesn't know what's going on or has studied hydromancy, pyromancy, or geomancy practices, for an example. So many people would look at that and be afraid. because they don't know what's going on. They think, oh, it's biblical. We're all going to die. Doesn't mean you're all going to die. It just means that there's something going on. Chan Thomas, I thought, did an awesome job in his book because it doesn't just look at the biblical aspects of everything, but it also comes down to the scientific observation of the poles, the North and South Pole, being shifted by about 30 degrees. And then you're dealing with the increased storms, the shifting of where the storms are hitting, the magnitude of the storms, the amount of tsunamis going into land masses, from earthquakes, either under water or on land. And he really touches on all of this stuff, and it's very, very good. So, if you're going to be a devout in any religion, you really got to have a sound mind and look at this. It's all right to be a devout. It's all right to be a believer in God, in Jesus, just as much as you would be if you were a Satanist and believing in Satan and Lucifer. Okay? But here it is. How do you lay down that foundation? What's important for any religious study and practice? Doesn't matter if it's necromancy, doesn't matter if it's Satanism, doesn't matter if it's witchcraft. You're dealing with the old pagan gods, for an example. If you're into voodooism or the Caribbean traditions, and you're working with the Loa, the Orisha, if you're dealing with the elements and you're looking at the planetary spheres, you got to have that in your mind. Okay, I've got to have a routine. I've got to have a structure. So how do I go about doing this? And this is something that they really don't teach in church anymore. Many of them will tell you, and I'm going to give this to you, my pastor friend, who's a Pentecostal apostolic pastor by the name of Wade Townley. He was the one that actually recommended me for the ministry years ago. And to be fair, I'm glad I took him up on it because it opened up a whole new avenue for me, and it's benefited me in a lot of different ways. So here it is. You go to him for I'm going to give you two aspects here. One is my son's mother, and one is him, my friend. Okay? You go to my friend, Pastor Wade Townley, and you say, hey, I've got this issue, right? And he'll go, take it to the altar. Take it to the altar. He won't explain why. He won't go into detail. He'll just say, take it to the altar. It's one thing to have a pastor call in to listen, but he'll tell you to take it to the altar and pray. He'll take it to the altar and pray. Lay it down. Don't pick the fucking thing up again. Don't pick it up. Just lay it down and walk away. Say a piece and walk away. Now, on the other hand, you have my son's mother. She's constantly telling me things. And when I look at her, I go, I don't care. I really don't care. I don't want to know. I don't freaking care. She'll throw my ministry into my face. You're a minister. It's what you do. It's like, shit. She threw it in my face. Knew that was going to come back to haunt me. So you can see the two avenues of being a minister and how it opens things up. But the other day when I took my son to this church, and he wanted to experience Sunday school for the first time. So because he's heard my stories about what happened to me when I was a kid. My friends were taken away in a gray minivan, came back a couple hours later, and it turned out, it was Sunday school at a Baptist church. And now that I look at it, getting into that van was kind of sketchy to begin with because it's an unmarked van. I mean, if it belongs to a church, it should have at least the church's name on it. Just saying. For those of you out there that have that type of van out there. Otherwise, you're probably going to get an Amber Alert put on your ass. But here it is. So, anyways, I got to the church, and it was for Sunday school. And I'm sitting there as a 6, 7, 8-year-old kid, never been to church, never had any religious, doctrine shoved down my throat or anything. And I had a spiritual moment when I was 5 years old, yes, where a spirit appeared to me. But outside of that, I've never gone to church. So seeing my friends go off in that van, I was kind of curious. I'm like, hey, Mom, can I go? She goes, yeah, go for it. So I went. So it turned out, like I said, it was a Sunday school. And I sat there, and the minister, he was an older guy, probably about 50s, maybe 60s. I forget the guy's name offhand, but it's been so long. It's been over 35 years. But he was talking about how the devil was evil, how he was the enemy of God, that he was cast out of heaven, and, how he's a murderer. And I just asked questions, I kept asking him, how do you know? Who said that? What made him the murderer? Just common sense. And this is coming from a 6, 7, 8-year-old child. And you know what he said? Don't come back. He kicked me out of the church. Why? Because I dared to ask questions. I dared to ask why. I dared to ask why. So he told me never to come back. So by the time I was 11, I was practicing occultism. Years later, about 2009 area, I ended up getting invited to a few churches, and I went just for shits and giggles. I didn't really give a shit about it, but to learn different applications of ministry, it was kind of cool, except for back then I wasn't a minister. And then I stepped foot in the apostolic church. I learned quite a bit that the Baptists will teach you as a man. They don't hold anything back. They'll teach you as a man. They'll treat you as a man. Basically, you are the responsible for your own education. I can't tell you how many times I spent just about every day in their library reading and studying. My mother's friend, partner at the time, was dying of cancer. And after he died, I left. I just left. I couldn't be there anymore. It was just seeing and the person die, having to do CPR on that individual. And to keep things going. Telling my mother what to do, how to do it, get my brother down here now, call 911 on my phone, whatever, having to explain to the 911 operator what's going on, what's being done, having to keep everything on the DL type thing. And, I split, and I went from there. I went into a Pentecostal church, learned quite a bit from there, and realized had a really bad experience there. I don't know what it is, but it was so bad I actually passed out. I remember it was almost like a vision type thing, because I remember standing there. I was feeling warm like I always do, like my body's seriously heating up. Like you're going to be sick. You get lightheaded, dizzy type thing. And it was like you're being repulsed by the music. And it was just like, I don't know what this is, but I don't freaking like it. And this one day, apparently I collapsed. They said I had fell straight back. I was stiff as a board. My skin turned gray. My eyes were all over the place. And I just remember, apparently this happened for like 3 seconds. But to me, I told him what the sermon was. I told him what the announcements were, and I even cracked jokes, you know, about the certain, the music and everything, and it was an interesting experience because of the fact that I ended up going down to VV, Indiana, and then down to South Tucson, and that's where I got into other types of sorcery, such as Santeria and Palo Mayumbi. Really enjoyed that. And I remember this one woman, she was a neighbor. She said, "You're straddling a double edged sword, and if time runs out, you'll be cut in two." Wow, that's brutal. But I realized that there are two applications here that people believe in, and it comes down to what's going on in today's world, their belief structure. So, anyways, I came back, got affiliated, with the Apostolic Church again, and like I said, as a practicing Satanist, at that time, I was heavily involved in a lot of things. I had to deal with the minister, my minister friend, and all that. So things weren't pretty good, and we were sitting there one night, and he says, "What would you guys like to do with the rest of your life? Have you thought about where you see yourself in, say, 5 to 15 years down the road?" And I was the only one that didn't have an answer because I didn't really think about it. I was in my 30s by this time, and it was like, you know what? I don't really care. I just don't give a shit. I just didn't care. And I remember he suggested the ministry to me. So when I left, I ended up going back down to the Southwest, and I ended up in a little hick town called Clarksville, Texas. You hear the dark side of religions, but you don't know shit until you've been singled out. And believe me, it's no fun being singled out, especially when you got 3 counties rising up against you and you have to put those wildfires out. That means you got to answer questions. That's when you got to step up and go, "Hey, this is have you thought about this? What you're saying, what you're asking? What have my actions shown you this far since I've been here in this little hick town? Wow, have I been polite? Have I, kept to myself? Have I tried, opening up a satanic church? No, I haven't. But the stories just kept getting wilder and wilder. And after about 6, 7 months, counties basically quieted down, went their own way, and realized what they were told was a bold-faced lie, and that came from a Catholic priest, a bishop, that did that. And I thought it was kind of funny that a cardinal removed that individual from his parish and took him down close to the Mexico border. It's kind of funny. But it still doesn't answer the fact about a routine. It didn't answer about a structure. So here we are, fast forward, years later. I've got a family of my own, separated from my son's mom. Still watching the dogs at her place. The cats stay with me. And my son wants to get into a church. Which I don't mind. That's his choice, but he wants to learn. He wants to learn the truth. And it's like, okay. He's heard the stories. He wants to experience it himself. It was like last night I asked him, you wanting to do this, wanting a Bible because Daddy has a whole bunch of them, or do you want to do it yourself? Are you doing it for you, basically, not for me? Because I want him to realize that religion, or any religion that he gets into, he's got to make it his own. You can't just force something like that on a child. He or she has to choose for themselves. This is why it's called free will. It's, and it's called the freedom of religion for a reason. Now, here it is. I'm sitting there the last few times I've taken him to this church, and I've watched them. I've watched everybody from the pastor all the way down. I've watched numerous different ministers come in, Wade Townley's brother and his son, you know, seeing their father, for an example, get up there and break down crying, something you've never seen from this man in over 13 years of knowing him. And it's like, wow, I didn't even know he could show emotion. I mean, you're looking at this wise guy, this wise man, and you're like, I figured he was the strong foundation, the patriarch of the family that held everybody in place. But no, he broke down the other day, and it surprised the hell out of me. But I started paying attention ever since I got into reading the Ethiopian Bible, the Way of the Pilgrim, the Book of Baruch. Since I started reading those, I started thinking about foundation. I started thinking about the proper methods of prayer and worship from a religious perspective as a spiritualist. I even got the Kalia coming in too. I got my minister friend one as well as myself, and I started thinking about this, and I was watching them because in the Ethiopian Bible it says that to worship God you got to go to the east. You got to supplement. You got to commit what is called supplication, which is also known in another language of today known as prostration. You got to face east. You got to prostrate yourself either on your knees, laying down, or facing a wall, if you will, just standing and facing that way, being on your knee or on your knees, being face down in the dirt, as the Hebrews and Judaism does. Even if you watch Islam, even in the Quran, people are face down on the mat, supplicating themselves unto their God, Allah. Very, very cool to see. So, just about every story from today's Bibles to the Ethiopian Bible talks about weeping, crying, showing emotion. There is a word that I've come across, and it's called kenosis. Now, what is kenosis? Kenosis is the method of emptying yourself completely. That means getting rid of your ego, getting rid of your pride, getting rid of your will. Basically, you have to apply yourself through prayer and supplication. You've got to hand yourself over fully, trusting in your God. In your God. And I'm going to say this again. In your God. You've got to hand yourself over to your God or gods. Okay? So I started thinking about this. This book here, the Book of Baruch, the penitential prayers and prophetic encouragement for Israel. I really enjoyed this little pamphlet, and it is a pamphlet once you get rid of the hard-covered aspects. And it really talks a lot about the message, how to rebuild the greatest libraries, for an example. We all know that one. Timeless lessons of faith, hope, and redemption. The text is structured into distinct sections. Contemporary relevance. Embark on your journey of faith and redemption. Engaging with the text. Personal and spiritual reflections. And that was all before you get into chapter 1. And then once you get into chapter 1, you're learning about things such as the lineages, the priests, how the 10 Commandments came into play. What are the 10 Commandments? The book of Exodus, the book of Deuteronomy, even the book of Hebrews tell you what they are. And basically, the Ten Commandments are broken down into legal laws, if you will, of spirituality, the cause and effect, if you will, causality. And it talks a lot about prayer. It talks a lot about being a devout. And it's a book that I do recommend for those of you who want to get a structured life and foundation into any religious practice. Really get into it because it is something that is interesting, and I've noticed something about my own spiritual practices since I started doing these 3 books: the Book of Baruch, the Way of the Pilgrim, and the Ethiopian Bible. The Book of Enoch, mostly. And I started thinking about this, and last night there was what was the guy's name? His name was Miller. Last name Miller. He was some kind of preacher. I don't know where he's from. He's an old guy. I think he mentioned something about being retired now, but he still gets to meet many different types of ministers. He gets to preach at different churches and everything like that. And I thought it was pretty cool because of the fact I kind of liked the way he was preaching at the time, and how he brought in the fact that you really need to lay the bricks. The father has to teach the son how to build, how to be a man, how to be, a good father, a good husband, how to build a home, how to build structures, and to teach, by means of being a carpenter, if you will. And the message that he put forth really stuck with me. It really inspired me because, as a dad to an 8-year-old boy, a son, I've always tried to do right by him. The first 7 years of his life, I let him stick by his mom because in that first segment of his life, it is about his connection, to his mother. It's about that nourishment. And then the second half, from 7 to 14 years old, it's all about daddy, because that's when he wants to impress me. That's when he wants to be like daddy. And I've noticed this firsthand because now he's dressing like me, If I'm wearing a suit, all of a sudden he's like, Dad, I want a suit. Can I get a suit, Dad? Or if I'm wearing one of my dress shirts and a pair of jeans, he wants to do the same thing. If I'm going off, reading, if I have a bag full of books, now he wants a bag full of books, So he's imitating me. And so when I heard this message last night about being a carpenter, being not the carpenter, but a carpenter, is how he put it. Because there's many carpenters, but there's only one carpenter, and that would be Jesus, okay, of Nazareth. That became the Son of God. And like I said, you go back into the Old Testament, you're going to see numerous scripture that in detail, or minor details, that will tell you of his coming. But it kind of struck me because we're building the building blocks. His mom and I get along. We work together to make sure that he's provided for, that he's educated, that he's got everything he needs to grow up and be big and strong. She wants him to be a Christian. I don't care what religion, if any, that he gets into, as long as he's happy. If he's interested in Christianity, then I'll make sure that he gets the best education possible so he doesn't fall into the snares and the traps. But even then, I used to walk around the neighborhood when walking the dogs over in Brewer, and when she lived there, and I was always praying, I was always praying to the deities that I work with. And one night he asked me, he goes, Dad, why are you talking to yourself? Why are you always talking to yourself when we're walking the dogs? And I said, I'm not talking to myself, buddy. He goes, yeah, you are. And I go, in a sense, to an outside observer, yes, I'm talking to myself. But in actuality, buddy, I'm praying. to the beings that I work with. I'm giving them homage. I'm paying them respect because they're choosing to work with your daddy. They're choosing to guide me, to educate me, and to help me become a better man, a better practitioner, and, a better father, you know, for you. And he goes, oh, I see. So what is a bricklayer? What is a bricklayer? What does a carpenter do but lay down a foundation, build upon a firm foundation? So I was studying this book here, and I'm already about three-fourths of the way through this book. This is my second time through this book, and I'm on page 30 right now. And it's really about a journey. The guy is clearly a Christian. He's a devout, but he's not a minister. He's not a minister, that's clear. But he is a devout. He holds close to his Bible. He's more like a nomad, a gypsy, if you will. He travels throughout the old world. I'm talking Russia, Ukraine, Slovakia, and all that region over that way. And he comes across many different people, and all he really wants to know is about prayer. He wants to know about prayer. He wants to know how to pray without ceasing. He wants to know the true meaning of prayer. So the first guy he comes across, he couldn't really help him. So he continues on down the road. All of a sudden he comes across the man, invites him to his parish, keeps him there for about a week before booting him out. During that week, he tells him, this is what prayer is. It's a routine, it's discipline, it's focus. It's laying down the building blocks. He says, you got to know the proper way of praying. So you got to look east. You got to supplicate yourself. You got to, prostrate yourself. You got to be focused solely in quiet. So, solitary means. This is how you learn to identify the voice coming from within you and hearing that guiding light. So he wanted him to pray in a certain way for an entire week and do it like, say, 1,000 times a day. So he comes back a week later, and the guy, the minister, the monk, looks at him and says, well, how'd you do? And the guy says, I still got the storms in my heart. I still got those questions. And he goes, okay, you've done good building the routine, but here it is. Now I want you to go back. There's a village a little bit down the way here. He points in the direction. He says, I can't have you staying here anymore. This is only for a weekly guest. This is not built for a long term. But if you go that way, short distance, you'll find a village. It's like an Airbnb, if you will. And I'm using modern day lingo for that, by the way. So he says there's like an Airbnb down there you can check into, do your thing. So the whole way through, he ended up going off the beaten path and a little bit, and he ended up going into. He was given a little book called the Philokalia. And what this is it's a small book. It's a book basically of like 15 to 20 saints who put in their experiences, their prayers, and all that stuff, their life works, and how they devoted themselves and approached it through prayer and religious worship, devoutship, if you will. So prayer is definitely the number one key piece of information on building a routine. And this is very, very clearly evident. And so he spends an entire month. He took his prayer from 1,000 times to 3,000 times a day, saying it silently in a certain phrase, like "Oh Lord, have mercy on me," type thing, and he kept doing that time and time again throughout the day, until his jaw hurt, until his jaw was cramped up. He was tongue tied. He was tired. He was thirsty. He was in pain. And he came back a month later, and the man goes, "Hey, well, you definitely quieted your heart. You've learned your most valuable lesson on how to pray successively. Now go off, experiment." So he went through Serbia. He went through, Slovakia and all these different areas. And he was robbed once. He was knocked unconscious and robbed. And then he ended up meeting a soldier who had been downgraded, shifted into a different a brigade type thing, where he was basically on prison detail. And he told him about his story of being an alcoholic and how it's cost him just about everything. So, and he said I was on the fast track as becoming a great officer before this. But he went into alcohol, and it almost destroyed his life. So he said he met a man. They gave him a Bible. And basically it's what we call the Gideon today, which is basically the New Testament. Like the Gospels and stuff like that, and then stuff in the New Testament. Book of Revelations, Jude, Hebrews, Corinthians, Acts, the Gospels type thing. And he said, anytime I had the urge to drink, I started reading a chapter of the Gospel, of Mark. Specifically, he said. And if I still had that urge to drink, he would read another chapter and another until it was gone. And over time, he realized, guess what? Just like this individual looking to know how to pray, ended up realizing, I don't need to be around people. I don't need to be around people, but I'll supplicate myself. I will prostrate myself. I'll pray constantly. This individual just started reading scripture and praying through scripture. And he started applying it to his life, just like this pilgrim. And in both these cases, so you need to have the doctrine, you need to have the right prayer, the right mindset to be able to pray. So what is the two things here? Number one, prayer. Number two, a doctrine. And then he ended up going off, and he cut through the deep woods, and he started avoiding people like crazy, going into long periods of solitude. And he ended up meeting this, I guess you can call him a nomad, if you will, because this guy was like it was like a village, if you not a village, but more like a how should I say this? It was like a section of the forest that was being protected by this one guy, and the guy actually started utilizing reading material, and giving offerings and sacrifices and stuff. And in return, the villagers would bring him bread weekly. He'd eat like once a day, fasting. So you got prayer, devotional prayer. You got a foundation of reading. It's what you read that benefits you. Just as in Man Thinketh, the science of being well, you're seeing where these stories are really laying it down as, okay, if we are to pray, we need to pray devoutly. We need to give our supplication, our offerings, our sacrifices, the sacrifice of our time, our hardships, our offerings, our pain, but we need to get ourselves straight to be able to do this. So the stories basically line up with the Ethiopian Bible, which I liked. And like I said, just reading the Ethiopian Bible, two things are made clear. Number one, there's a lot of selfishness in the world, and it comes down to a wide range of spectrums. You hear where God made Adam a helper, how they produced offspring and all that stuff, just like animals do. They were the tillers of the ground. So they put in the work. They worshipped the Most High, Jesus or God. But nowhere in the Bible does it say that Satan is the enemy of God. Nowhere. In fact, it doesn't even say that he betrayed God. But yet, in the poetical text, it shows Jesus and Satan going down to the underworld during the 3 days after the crucifixion and before the resurrection, where he removes Beelzebub, from the Lord of Flies, the Lord of the which is Sabbath, from the throne of hell, or Gehenna, Sheol, if you will, and he placed Satan on the throne. And that's how Satan became the bad guy in today's world. But you see why the commandments are so important. The rules within this religion, within the religion of Christianity, Catholicdom, or whatever you want to call it, Islam, the Islamic traditions or the Hebrew traditions. The Hebrew Bible, I'd recommend it, especially if you can get your hands on the Hebrew English edition. The Jewish Bible is very, very good. There's a guy that actually wrote that one. I guess the story goes that he had written the Old Testament down, and people liked it so much they asked him to do the whole Bible. So he ended up doing the New Testament as well, and put them together. But no, there's a whole bunch of stuff that is not in today's Bibles, which is why it's so chaotic, and most people look at it and abhor from it. It's because they don't know, and those that go to church today, they buy into the BS of whatever the minister says for them to do. If he wants you to come down and run around the pews, like in, say, apostolic tradition, full-grown men bawling their eyes out, the lower jaw so loose that they claim they're talking in tongues. But yet, if you listen closely enough, there's different sentences that they're doing. Basically, different hormonal tones when they speak. You got the ones that the lesser minister uses, and then you have the one that the pastor uses. One's got way more conviction when doing it, confidence, compared to those walking around the sanctuary, speaking and praying and weeping. But you see, number one, they're facing northeast, not east. They're walking around in circles, looking around as they're walking over and placing their hands on other people. The women associate with the women, the men associate with the men. And then you see where you got different subjugations of classes within the church. The elders stick to themselves. The youth stick to themselves. The elderly stick to themselves. And it doesn't matter what church you go into, you're going to see that. So how do you get a structure into your life? How do you get structure? How do you get a foundation that works for you? Number one, you got to know what you're getting into. This means tracing everything back to its original sources. I've said this time and time again in my videos. You got to bring it back to the original sources. Or at best, as close as you can to finding that truth. Seeing the differences, seeing the variances, seeing the offshoots. And like I said, going back between the Vatican and the Church of Axiom, it's like the Church of Axiom didn't even get the freaking memo that 20 books or 22 books had to be removed from the Bible. Because the committee said so. Okay, right, because a man-made committee says you have to get rid of these 22 books. How does that make sense if you are aligning yourself to the will of God. Wow. Okay. But yet, the Ethiopian church, the Church of Axiom, continued to subscribe and rewrite these doctrines to keep them up to date within scrolls, within books. They climbed up rope ladders to go up a rock face. They ruined their backs, they ruined their eyes to do all this stuff. Now, personally, I think that's quite honorable to keep that stuff pure, to keep the work pure, which is why not only am I grateful to the Ring of Grimm for putting these books out there, but also helped guiding me over the last 3 years. I've really enjoyed their teachings, and beginning this journey into the Ethiopian Bible and the work surrounding it, I think this is a great video to begin with, because there's a lot of books. Like, there's still other books that I've got to get into that I've never read. For an example, let's see, the Song of the Three Jews, the Prayer of Azariah, Bel and the Dragon. I read the Prayer of the Three Children. That was a pretty good prayer. The book of, I wouldn't call it a book. It's more like a page, really, page and a quarter of Susanna. That was an interesting read, seeing a female's perspective. The Book of Baruch, very, very good book. You got 2 of them there, the 4th Baruch and Baruch in here. That's pretty good. You got the letter of Jeremiah. You've heard of the book of Jeremiah, but this is the actual letter that he wrote. And it's very, very amazing. You got the wisdom of Solomon in here. You got Proverbs and Masali. Proverbs, Tess, Gas in here. You got 2 books of 2nd Ezra, 1st Ezra. The prayer of Manasseh in here. 1st and 2nd Enoch in here. You've got, like I said, a lot of things. And it's just like, even at the end of the book, you got the first epistle of Clement to the Corinthians, and it's like, you got Philemon in here too, and it's like, God damn, there's so much in here. You're like the book of Meqayan 1, 2, and 3. That's spelled Meqabyan. I've never even heard of this book until I got the Ethiopian Bible. So like I said, I started with the Book of Jubilees, and on the car ride down to the desert of Maine the other day, between with my son and his grandparents, I read a few of these prayers, and I read some, the Book of Baruch, and I was reading the book of the Way of the Pilgrim, and like I said, putting all this stuff together, it's amazing, a lot of knowledge. So in 1st Enoch, I am currently, let me get back here real fast, 1 Enoch, I'm on chapter 20, what is it, yeah, I'm on 31 right now, of 1st Enoch, chapter 31. Really taking my time and really seeing how this stuff is brought out. Yeah, so chapter 20 is where the angels who watch, Uriel, one of the holy angels who presides over clamor and terror. Raphael, one of the holy angels who presides over the spirits of men. Racuel, one of the holy spirits who inflicts punishments on the world and the luminaries. Michael, one of the holy angels who, presiding over human virtue, commands the nations. Sirach, one of the holy angels who presides over the spirits of the children of men that transgress. Gabriel, one of the holy angels who presides over Ikizat, be over paradise and over the cherubim. And that's before you even get to chapter 22, who really goes down into the watchers and everything. And I mean, like I said, you go back even further and you can get into all the angels that fell. It's downright amazing to see. Downright amazing to see all the changes. And like I said, if you're going to get this book, the Ethiopian illustrations, it's the Ethiopian Bible in English, complete 88 books with Ethiopian illustrations. And this was by Reverend Press that put this one out. And let's see here. But yeah, if you're going to get that and you want to read the books of Enoch, I would also recommend getting this one as well. This one here was actually translated by J.H. Charles, edited by John Smith, attributed to Enoch. And it was published in copyright of 2010. Basically, the Book of Enoch, Enoch and John Smith, first ed, Religion and Apocrypha is what this one entails. And I'm glad I have this because getting into, like I said, first Enoch 106, it deals with, doesn't matter if you're tall, short, black, white, red, or what color eyes you have, whatever. It really talks a lot about, between that and other chapters from like Galatians, Revelations, going back as far as, say, Daniel's or Ezekiel, going back into the book of Ezra and so forth. Even Genesis, it talks about, the eyes of illuminaries, of Illuminism, that they thought that an archangel or a demon had possessed this one guy, this one child, this newborn. But the hair was white as snow, and the beard was white. The eyes were white. And it was like, wow, okay. I can see why you think this child was possessed, but still. You really got to have a full frontal of understanding. All right? So I do recommend these books to you. And I do hope that you go out and get them. Like I said, all these books that I've spoken of here is in the description platform, underneath the description. But I thought this was a great way to start the series. Really get into the series and do a complete series of the Ethiopian system of Christianity, because I've done a lot of systems over the years, a lot of series. So this is going to be the first one based off of this. So I've talked a little bit about Bible stuff. I've talked a little bit about scriptures. I've even played the devil's advocate, if you will, when talking about ministers and the way Christians view things. How people, like the zealots and everything, view things. And I've talked a little bit about that. But now I want to be able to show it to you and bring it to you in a series. So, like I said, always there are two rules that I always live my life by. And number one is always back up what you preach with numerous sources. You've seen the sources that I'm going by. Okay? You've seen it. I've shown it to you. It's in the description box down below. These are the books I'm going to be going through and studying over the next 6 months. Okay? Now, the reason I want to do it over a 6-month period is because I want it to be not only applicable, but I want it to be a practice. I want to build a foundation that will enable my followers, meaning you guys, that if this resonates with you, that you will go out and do it and get the materials and apply it to your life. Who knows? Maybe you'll come up with something I've missed. You don't know. And that's the good thing about spirituality, is because you make it your own. It's your connection between you and your God. No matter if it's you and a demon, you and a fallen angel, you and, Jehovah. and so forth. It's all between you and him and that being. So your faith in that being, the way you pray to that individual, the way you prostrate yourself, your offerings and your sacrifices, the time that you put into your religion, that's what I want to do over the next 3 to 6 months. It's not just to help guide my son, but it's also to show him hard work pays off. I want him to learn you got to lay the bricks, you got to lay the foundation, and then you got to build on that foundation. I mean, I've done 2 to 3 libraries over my lifetime. 2 to 3 libraries. And now I've got a library that is honoring my path. And, you know, it's kind of cool to see. So I guess you could say I have been blessed over the years. Some ways that I wish I was blessed in, and others, you know, unfortunately I'm not. So the one thing I can do is educate myself, better myself, you know, be a role model for my son, and guide him along his own path, especially if he wants to get into religion. So always back up what you preach with numerous sources. It's very, very vital as a rule, because when you back up what you preach, it shows that you are responsible and accountable, that you know what you're talking about. And number 2, always make yourself available to the public, because you're responsible for the things that you do and say. You're accountable for the things that you do and say. You are, you know, you're not just considered an elder in your community, but you're an ambassador for whatever God or gods that you worship. You've got to sit there and put all this stuff into play. It's responsibility and accountability. It shows that you're responsible enough to take responsibility for your own actions. You're going to tell the truth no matter what. It doesn't matter how many people hate on you. It doesn't matter how many people try to shun you. It doesn't matter about other people, because your faith is your own. Your religion is your own. You know, and this is why I do these book reports. This is, you know, these book reviews. This is why I put the material forth, so that you're seeing where I'm coming from, and you can take it and go, okay, I'm going to practice this. I'm going to apply this to my life. Wow, this is either benefiting me or it's not. So what can I change that's going to allow me to benefit? What is it that I personally seek in this particular religion? And in this case, like I said, it's the Ethiopian Bible. It is a Christian Bible. And to be able to put something like this forth, it takes courage, takes dedication, commitment. It means laying down those bricks, building a firm foundation to stand on, but also to build, not just for me, but for my son. And if his mom wants to get into it, along with her current boyfriend, so be it. But at least you're being a role model. And you're letting your son or your daughter, in my case it's a son, choose for himself. Like last night, I asked him point blank, because he looked right at me and said, Dad, I'd like to get a Bible. I said, are you doing this for me or for you? He looked at me, didn't quite understand what I was going for. And I said, buddy, are you doing this for you because this is the religion that you want to get into? Does it speak to you personally? Or do you want to do it because Daddy has a lot of books from a wide range of religions, sources, and practices? So he wants to get an Ethiopian Bible. So I'm going to look around and get him. If I can get another one like mine, I will do so. But either way, he asked for a Bible, just like he asked for a suit, and Daddy's going to get it for him. If not me, it'd probably be either his mama or his grandparents. But either way, somebody's going to get it for him. He wanted a bookshelf in the room, so I got him a bookshelf. And I keep out there, I keep all my occult stuff. I keep all my philosophical books. I keep, you know, all my, the books that I mainly read. Now, in here, right to my left here, my right, excuse me, my right, I've got a 5 bookshelf case with probably about 3 of the 5 shelves full of Christianized books, such as the Herbert Locklear's series on the Bible. Love that series. That's something, I'll be reading a Satanic Bible or, a Wiccan Bible, and all of a sudden something, or I'll be reading like the Devil's Apocrypha, and, or a philosophical book, and all of a sudden something will just come into play, and it's like, where have I seen that before? Like the 12 Stages Rules for Life by Peterson, the parapsychologist, lives in Canada. And it's like, wait, I've read that before. Where have I read that? So it's like, right, came from the Book of Parables, or the Book of Doctrines, or the Book of Prophecies, the Book of whatever, on men or women or whatever. And he had like 18 books that he wrote back in, I think it was like 1987. And there were actually blue books back then, and since then they've moved into paperback, and I've got all of them. Incredible books. I've even got The Second Coming. I've got Demons. I've got a lot of different books, different Bibles, different types of works and stuff like that from the Christian perspective, from the Christian religion. So the Ethiopian Bible isn't, anything new. It's just something very, very old. So, but that's the point. There is you gotta go by a third party perspective when you're delving into something, and you got to think about the virtue of having a firm foundation, laying the bricks, and building upon it. Especially if you're going to be making a religious faith. If you are a Satanist and you're looking at it, or a witch or a warlock, a druid, let's go with a bruo, you're probably going to look at this and go, but if you open your mind and you actually look at it as a scientific thing or a different perspective of religious viewpoints, you can actually benefit yourself. So, not just your practices. Like I said, reading The Way of the Pilgrim really opened my eyes on prayer. And I thought that was pretty cool because I try to pray, but I find myself running lesser on what to say than how to say it. I normally just blurt it out in mantras or whatever, but when it comes to actual praying, there's a certain touch to it that you need. And this particular book by Tumanova, Nina A. Tumanova, that's Toumanova. That's how you spell her name. Really spoke to me. And it really did. It really spoke to me. It resonated with me quite heavily, and I enjoyed that. Which is why I'm reading this book again. And like I said, I'm already on page 30 with it, and I'm getting new things from it every time. I love it. It's like reading the Bible, or any Bible, because every time you read it, you're going to pick up on something new, especially when you apply it to your life. So, like I said, this is the first video in this series. And I'm looking forward to seeing what other things will come into play that's going to play into this. Now, I do appreciate my followers. I want to thank everybody for jumping on here with me. From Liazi, was that Zasin Liazi? I don't even know how to pronounce your name there, man. But hello, welcome to the channel. Hi, Zion05. Welcome to the channel. You know, the funny thing is, Hellboy, is even as a practicing occultist, a necromancer, there are different realms. There are different planes of existence. There are different dimensions. The multiverse is vast, you know, and that's very acute and definite. It's mind blowing. So when you look at it, you know, Mel Gibson referred to it as, when he was doing the Resurrection video, the second film to Passion of the Christ, after what has it been, like 20 years, give or take, like 25 years. He said it's almost like an acid trip. Now, personally, I don't know what that experience would be like, but I know what transversing planes of existence is from an occult perspective. So I get where he's talking about, where there's 7 levels of heaven in one book. There's 10 in another. And you have to sit there and go, okay, if God's at the top of this and he's working his way down through all the levels of the angels, all the different levels of heaven, he has to dim down his light, his grace. And it's even said that he hid himself while doing so from those in heaven as he's descending. Think about that. Kenosis, emptying yourself completely. He's willingly dimming his light. He's dimming his grace, or ridding himself of that grace, as he's descending down Jacob's ladder, if you will, to become born of a virgin, to grow up as Jesus the Son. And like I said, even in the Old Testament, there's telltale signs that he was doing this, or going to do this, long before he actually did it. Now, there's no hell in the Old Testament, but yet there's a hell in the New Testament. Sheol is where all the spirits go, but yet Gehenna is the actual prison in the New Testament, which is known as hell, the place of fire and brimstone. You have hell, which is the county jail, and the prison is Gehenna. But all the souls go to that intermediary area, which is called Sheol, to wait judgment, where the spirits are either, according to the Book of Enoch, all the souls are there to either judge those that murdered them, those that betrayed them, those that you did wrong. But also, you've got also the fallen angels. You've also got the Nephilim that's there too. So you got those houses. And then, like I said, depending on how you lived, and you reject the judgment, which is in one of these planes, you see where not only did he come down, but he went back up. But those spirits of the angels, of the Nephilim, of the humans, they can only go one direction. And the only way they can go the opposite direction is if Jehovah allows it. Now, like I said before in a video, Yeshua, or Yahweh, is an abbreviation of Yeshua. And Yeshua was actually originally Joshua. Wow. So Joshua came down. So you had the Father, the Son, and then the child, which is the Holy Ghost, the intermediary part. But the judgment is the main theme in the Ethiopian Bible. It's all about justice. It's all about prayer and supplication. It's about devotion and having that religious structure. It's not what modern day Christians teach you. So I'm taking a good, honest look at this Hellboy, and I'm going to be applying it to my life for me and my son for the next 3 to 6 months, just to see what's going, maybe longer, depending on how much studying is really going to be needing to be done. But I do want to put this forth for him and see where things go. But you are right. There are other dimensions in infinite universes. And it is, and you're right. It's definitely a simulation. It's a matrix. It's a, you know, let's call it a computer program inside of a computer program. Nothing but a bunch of ones and zeros. Del Schreer, Ella Lee, welcome and hello. Robert Liles 3410. Oh, I would have to choose. That's a very good question. If you could choose one book to read, which book would you pick? That is a very good book. That is a good question. If I could choose one book, I I would probably go with the book of the Ethiopian Bible, hands down. But out of the Ethiopian Bible, out of all 88 books within that, I would have to go with the Book of Revelations. And this is why. I did a in-depth study of that book. Broke it down. I had what was it? About 40 to 60 pages of notes. And that was just the cliff notes, if you will, from an index of nothing but scripture and what it entailed. And I broke it down. Basically, I took the end times and I broke it down into the 21 retributions, if you will, from the bowls to the trumpets and everything. I broke it down from start to finish and everything. And when I handed it to Robert Town, to Wade Townley, because I gave him a copy of it. This was way back before I met my son's mother. I had given him a copy, and I had disappeared for almost a couple of weeks. And I can't remember what was going on during that week, that couple of weeks, but something had occurred where I had to disappear for a while, and I was doing other things. I think it was work is what happened. As I got called into work, and I was just working so much. And when I came back, he took me by the arm, and he was just, you know how you just take somebody's arm gently and just move their bicep, and let their arm wiggle, type thing in your grip. And he said, "Brother, I read what you put. I read that, all of it. I read it." He was mind blown. He was tongue tied. He did not expect anybody to sit there and break down the book of Revelations in such a way that it details every freaking thing that's going to transpire. And much of that we're seeing today. I'm telling you that straight right now. There's much of it that's fitting in here right now, in this day and age. And to be honest, it is downright scary to see. You're seeing brother against brother, sister against sister, child against a parent. You're seeing all the shootings. You're dealing with the kids gone wild. The teens gone wild. You got the war in Hollywood. You got the wars in the Middle East. You got, nation against nation. uh, the people against, uprising against the government agencies such as law enforcement and stuff. You're seeing more and more. You got men versus women. It's a huge freaking thing, and we're seeing this more and more in today's world, and it's just getting worse. So you're looking at the Book of Revelations, and you're looking at what's going on in the world, and it's like let's just say there are some things once you see it, you cannot unsee it. That's like going into the Book of Enoch and delving into how the angels fell, and or even the Book of Jubilees, and you're going into all this stuff, and just there are just things that you just can't unsee. There's things that you just can't unknow because you've delved into it, you've seen it, and now it's like it's haunting your dreams. And that's basically what that study did. And so that day that he took me aside and he was trying to tell me about it, I mean, if looks could express themselves, you could see it in his eyes. You could see it in the tone of his voice. The way he was just holding on to my arm, trying to get those words out. It had impacted him in such a way that the only words he could finally get out was, "That was deep. That was deep." This is why he comes to me when it comes to research, because he'll give me a topic and say, "Can you do some research for me?" And I'll, over the next week, I'll delve into just that alone and bring up everything from the Bible and from other sources and everything, and just hand it to him. And because I go into such a deep, deep dive into whatever I'm doing that it becomes an obsession. Literally, it becomes an obsession. That's how far I take it. It would be like a drug addict, basically. The only thing you can think about is that next fix. With me, it doesn't matter if it's angelology, demonolatry, shamanism. It doesn't matter if it's herbology. It doesn't matter if it's brujeria. It doesn't matter if it's Santeria, Pedo Satanism, witchcraft, or even doing an in-depth study into something like this. I don't go part way. I don't go halfway. I go all the way. So when I study things like the Book of Revelations, there's always something within that layer that you can peel away and see a whole new viewpoint and structure within it. And that I'm going to use the exact same term that he used. That is deep. That is why I would choose the Book of Revelations over any other book. But the Ethiopian book as a whole, I would recommend that one. That's actually a pretty cool book to read. I have done a lot of research. Instead of calling it tarot readings, why don't you go back into cartomancy? Check that out. It actually goes all the way back to the 11th century. It's spelled Cartomoncy. Cartomancy. Very, very good read. And you can see how it's changed over 900 years. Or even 1,000 years now, but still. Very, very good read. And there's different ways to do it. Different methods, different types of practice with it. You're welcome. One of the things I will tell you is trust your intuition. You hear the term trust your gut. One of the things that I like to do is when I'm doing a tarot, a reading for somebody, and I always go by multiple different types of cards, decks. Like if I get the sense that I'm going to be needing, say for an example, let's go with the Ian Daniels deck, the vampire deck. Okay. I'll use that one because of the emotional aspects, because you're dealing with four main structures: the physical, the magical, the spiritual, and the nature of what's going on in the questions. Now, if I'm not using that one, I'll probably use the oops. I'll probably not sure what happened there, but okay. That was weird. It's almost like it had a glitch in the system. But anyways, I would look at it from, like, say, let's go with the Druid deck. You know, the Druidic deck, the Celtic Druid deck, which deals more with the spiritual applications. You can go with the Black Tarot deck, you know, which is pretty cool too. This is my newest deck that I got. This one here I use sometimes for quick readings, something for clients when they need just something quick. Let's say, for an example, I'm doing a open tarot card read live. I'm just going to use that deck so that it doesn't take up too much time, and I can just lay down the cards, get a feeling of what the cards represent. I'll run my hands over it. I'll look at the question, and then I'll probably have images into mind or thoughts come into mind, and I'll look at what the cards mean, because you'll have the past, present, and future, or you'll go into different dimension, you know, different journeys that you can do, like the triangle reading or the equal armed cross reading. You know, the prophecy reading, for an example, which is one card, by the way, whereas the equal armed cross one is actually four cards down and one on either side. Um, you know, and then you got the pyramid, which is two pyramids of cards that you've got going down. So you're choosing one of the cards and you're going with it. And by the time you're at the very bottom, then you're going to sit there and go, wow, this is all what's going on in your world right now. This is surrounding your particular question or issue. I've heard that deck is pretty good. One of the best ones that I've come across is Donald Tyson's The Necromaicon deck. That's pretty good. The Fallen Angels deck is pretty good, and like I said, I really enjoy the Ian Daniels Vampire deck. That's probably my most favorite deck right there, is the Ian Daniels. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of different ways to do it. But it comes down to letting if you're, you know, facing somebody, let them shuffle and let them lay down the cards, and all you have to do is transcribe them. Very easy. Just tell them what the cards mean. Don't hold anything back, and let them do what they do. That's the way I look at it. But I will tell you this as well, as when you're shuffling, whatever god or entity that you're working with, I would highly recommend, let's say, for an example, you're doing a spiritual reading. So you would go with, like, say, seer, murmur, Bifrin, you know, type thing. Let's go with Bifrin. So I would sit there and shuffle, and I'd call Bifrin forth to shine his light on the reading as I'm shuffling it and doing the bridge and all that stuff. So ask him, I'm being told this. I want to know the root cause. You know, what's really going on behind this question and this issue. You know, share with me your wisdom, your insights, and then on the final shuffle and the final bridge, I'll thank him for taking the time to do that for me, and then I'll lay down the cards. You know, because that way I can actually get a good look at what's behind the issue or the topic. You know, think of it as the root cause to an ailment. I do, because let me put it to you this way. You pay your electrician. You pay your plumber. You pay the carpenter that builds your home, right? That fixes up your home for you. You pay your employee. So why wouldn't you not pay the practitioner giving you the reading? I charge $150 for an hour. $150 just to do an open read, just to do as many readings within that hour to find the root cause. You can ask as many questions as you want, but you're paying me for my time. That's the way I'm putting it to you. They want your service. History has shown that many people go to practitioners and offer that will pay them for their time and their service. And if they can't pay finances, for an example, monetary gain, then they'll give something of equal, value. Some would give furs, others would give fish. Either way, you're giving something of value. But either way, it is consumerism. And this goes back hundreds of years. And it's written in I don't know how many tomes. So yes, I would charge. Hands down, I would charge people for my time. And if you go underneath my Facebook profile, you'll notice that I have an entire list of things that I offer. I go through PayPal. It's a business account. Black sorcery for hire. But I also, like I said, I've got it on my Facebook account. I've got it right here. Yeah. So, and I even do TikTok. I don't really do live videos on TikTok, but mostly I don't really do things on Facebook that much anymore, but it's mostly just here on YouTube. But yeah, if you look down my profile here on YouTube, I've posted the same things, the same services that I offer, and I give prices. I've had people look at me and go, your prices are too high. Well, my reply to these people is this. Do you want quality or do you want quantity? If you really want my service and you want somebody that knows what they're doing, you're not going to get somebody fake paying my prices. You're going to get the real deal. You're going to get the real customer that really needs help. Now, don't get me wrong, I am willing to work with my customers. If you don't have the money up front, I'll take some of it. And then you can have payments after that. But either way, it gets done. And I always send things like videos and photos of whatever rituals and rites that I do. If I'm performing a wedding as an ordained multi-faith archbishop, then guess what? There's going to be videos. There's going to be photos being taken during that time. So you can see that it's being done correctly and that the work's being done. I'm going to give you an invoice so it is legal. It is a business adventure. So it doesn't matter if I'm doing a ritual, if I'm doing a reading, or if I'm doing ministry. It's there. So, anyways, I'm going to get off here. My son is supposed to be coming home. His grandparents are supposed to be dropping him off at some point. I don't know when. Last time I heard, he was having an art battle, Lego battle with his grandfather. Little punk is ignoring the bacon and going for the main pancakes, if you will, like the French toast. But it is what it is. But at least he's having fun. there are books that you can get. Let me see here, real fast here. Let me go out here. Where did I put those? Let me see. I think it's over here. Let me put this down real fast. Let's see. Right there. All right. So let me see if I can turn this around here. This book right here. I used to go by the tarot card decks and what they represented. Until I came across this book here and realized that there is a lot of information that these books do not give you. This is one of the best books that I would recommend on tarot card reading. So, that's what I would recommend to you. If you really want to get into bettering your skills, that is one source of information I would give you, outside of what I've told you. And you're welcome. So, like I said, if you like what I do and what I'm about as an educator, not just as a spiritualist, as a practitioner of the arts, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Feel free to hit that notification button so you don't miss when I'm on again. I want to thank everybody for jumping on here with me and engaging. It means a lot. For those of you who are going to jump on after the fact, thank you. And like I said, back up what you preach with numerous sources and always make yourself available to the public. You're responsible and accountable for the things that you do and say. All right? Have a good day.